Okay, we have started recording. Welcome everyone to week 10. Week 7, week 10. Oh, it's not week 10. So week 7, we are looking at early years teachers as change agents. So with a focus on professional learning. Okay. So teacher as change agent, it is very much about your sense of purpose. So I guess this would include your drive to improve and change your practice as necessary, which is very much what our assessment tasks are about. So many of you have actually completed this unit with the hope of adapting your future approaches to curriculum and pedagogy in the early years and in your learning environments. So it's about being a change agent. So it's the difference that you want to make in your teaching. So it's also about identifying the tools, but also the attitude needed to prepare you to engage and implement this productive change. So this is as an individual, but in your learning environments, it could very much be collaboratively as well. So some of you have been talking about developing workshops. Some of you have been talking about learning walks and peer observation as part of your professional development plan. So collaboratively is an important part of any change implementation. So in this session, we're going to actually be focusing on you as a change agent and how thinking about how you're going to support these changes. So this might include developing resilience and also skills to support your future endeavours. I've also allocated quite a bit of time at the end to discuss your ideas for your professional development plan. So hopefully you've started to think about that and you've got some ideas ready to share. So Bandura stated that to be a change agent is to intentionally make things happen by one's actions. So in line with this statement, teachers as change agents are open to change and, to acting accordingly. In Fulham's opinion, the teacher as a change agent is a professional who will be effective, and to be effective must actually become a career-long learner. So this would include more sophisticated pedagogies and technologies. So such a teacher would be able to form and also reform productive collaborations with colleagues, with parents, and also with the community as well. So I guess if we want the best for children growing into the new 21st century, we have to be willing to seek out and to be part of the perpetual transformation that is very much early childhood education and care. So 4 general characteristics of change agent have been described, and these include lifelong learning, as we've already discussed, mastery, entrepreneurship, and collaboration. So they're the 4 characteristics that change agents have been described as needing. So as we discussed earlier, so 21st century teaching and learning, it's pedagogy is very much a part of this, and it refers not only to our strategies, to our styles and approaches to teaching, but also our ability to manage the transformations that it might involve. And this might be individual transformations, it might be social, or it might be structural or institutional as well, depending on your context. So it really is about adapting our pedagogy to specific circumstances as they unfold. So in our current situation, it's a perfect example in the current climate with COVID of how teachers are adapting their practices and approaches to support their children and students' learning. And this is within diverse contexts and situations as well. So, you know, part of it is recognizing all those social inequities that impact children's learning. So the vast majority of households in Australia, as we know, you know, they have broadband internet. That's, you know, some of them do. I don't right at this very moment, but with, as I said, I'm currently hotspotting from my phone because the internet in our area has just gone down conveniently. But, you know, there are still really big disparities by income, by race, and, you know, the educational level of parents. So, you know, we really do have to consider all of those equity situations. So many of my students in this very unit shared with me last year, so right in the middle of lockdown, that they were actually having to prepare and send home individual paper-based learning packages. So this was to support those students that didn't actually have access to the internet. So, and you know, this is quite a number of students. Yeah, so Leisha has said this, yeah, some areas don't have access to internet due to location or mobile access. Yeah, so, you know, it is really about adapting approaches to those individual students. Have any of you had to, you know, been in this situation during the lockdowns that we've had with students and have had to adapt your practices? Has anyone been affected by this? Any practicing teachers that we have here tonight?
I have.
Yeah.
I'm not a classroom teacher, I'm a learning support teacher.
Yeah.
So for some of our students who were unable to access what our school had put online, we did email home modified work, student specific modified work, which was quite a challenge for some because they had like big STEM projects that we had to modify according to their learning needs. It was a good challenge, and obviously it wasn't me on my own. So yeah, that's what we had to do.
Yeah. So imagine in this sort of situation, you would really need to be reflective, you would need to be adaptive, you would need to be collaborative. So, you know, communicating with colleagues, but also with parents as well. And this is something that really came out of the COVID situation for teachers, just the importance of those connections with parents and families. And also resilience as well, because basically during COVID, not just us here in Australia and probably even more so overseas, we're really needing to reinvent best practice in a lot of ways. And of course, because it was happened all so quickly, usually it would involve a commitment to professional learning and professional development. But for a lot of teachers, you know, there was what a difference of 1 week, 2 weeks to adapt all of your resources and approaches to an online environment. So that, I think a lot of teachers struggle because there wasn't that opportunity to have that professional development and to upskill. We've got students completing an entire online third-party course, no mobile access or internet access, had to get permission to print information. Oh, yeah. And Fiona says teaching online is so different to teaching face-to-face. It is, and especially with young children. I love these images here, you know, the teacher with the word wall on the back with her Walt and Wilf and, you know, just doing what you possibly can to assist them. Kamiko says in Japan, teachers visited students' homes. Oh, that's interesting. And in China, some teachers felt uncomfortable to teach online. Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure that you're not alone. A lot of teachers at a university level as well, who hadn't had a lot of experience in teaching online, felt very uncomfortable as well. So I'm sure those of you that were studying last year saw that some of us really struggled. It wasn't easy at all. Luckily, with this unit, because we do have a big online component, it was kind of business as usual. But in saying that, I could see the stress that it put so many of our students like yourselves under. It was a very, very difficult time. We had quite a few students / teachers that had to withdraw because they couldn't cope with teaching online and updating all of their resources and studying at the same time. So that was a bit of a difficulty. So in China, were you saying that they didn't know how to teach online? Yeah, yeah. So it's something that would really need upskilling. And the situation to move to an online forum was almost instant. Yeah, teachers and students had to adapt within 2 weeks. That's a lot of adaptation to accomplish in 14 days. It certainly is. And I have to say that I think it just showed how the amazing resilience of so many teachers and their ability to do what they did. Even though it was difficult, the majority of schools were very successful in implementing it in such a short period of time. So I would definitely say change agents for sure. And it's a really good example of that as well. So I wanted to just I want you to think about what kind of emotions do you think you might feel as teacher, as a change agent. So I want you to put yourself in the position of, say, for example, implementing your action plan that you're working towards. I want you to think about the emotions that you would be feeling when you're endeavoring to make the intended adaptations or changes in your learning environment or to your pedagogical approaches. So just think about what you'll have to do and how you might be feeling. Some of you may be in a leadership role and will have to work with other people, collaborate. Others it may more just be a classroom situation and you will be assisting and supporting students. But think about emotionally what you think it might be. Any thoughts?
Daunting.
Very daunting, Shan. Yeah, especially if you're wanting to make some pretty big changes. If they're changes that you're concerned may not be met with favour, you know, some teachers in your learning environment may not feel quite as enthusiastic as you or advocate for what you personally want. So yeah, you might be feeling new, like taking on a new position or replacing someone. That would be quite difficult in a lot of ways. It isn't just our feelings, it's sometimes hard to cope with other people's feelings as well. So other people's feelings about change. Do you mean, Pamela, how they cope with change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not only your own feelings of how you're going to do it, but it's also moving people along
Yeah.
And it's also taking into consideration their feelings, and it might be okay for you to be wanting being an agent of change, but sometimes the hardest thing is bringing the other people along
Oh yeah.
with their anxieties and everything as well.
Oh, definitely. So it's something that you really need to consider and also plan for as well. So to have strategies in place about how you might mitigate some of those feelings. Any change can be stressful, thanks, Jade. Yeah, or met with anxiety as it puts people out of their comfort zone. Yeah. Sometimes it can be anxious to change anything as the administration don't like change that is not directed by them. Yeah, Alicia, definitely. That's a very good point. So I think it's more about I don't know, manipulating the situation so that maybe they feel that they're involved in the change, that they're part of the process. I feel anxious about change, the transition from kindergarten to primary school in China. Yeah, definitely. It's Yifang, it's yep, trying to advocate for your beliefs, I think, and how best to do that. The other people need to have some buy-in and see the reason for any change. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle. Good point, Fiona. Isolated as the change that I want to make goes against neoliberal business practices and convincing the major stakeholders that the silent benefit of investment has a better outcome for all instead of the instant fiscal bottom line. Definitely, yeah. And feelings of isolation, yeah, definitely, Warren, yeah. So it's, I guess, at the center of it, well, I guess the bottom line needs to be the needs of the children, doesn't it? And I think that's something that everyone needs to be reminded that, you know, to convince those stakeholders that that's what we're working towards. I think that I will feel excited to talk about something that I'm passionate about. I like that, Kamiko. Yeah, I think that's a good way to be feeling. I think that's important. So, yeah, I think excitement of a new challenge is a great way to think about it. Inspiration, I guess, from reading about new learning approaches. Fear of resistance, that's a very normal feeling. I guess some of you may also be thinking about how change might impact on children and how to manage that change. You know, and a lot of this will have to do with whether it's a short-term plan or a long-term plan, how you're going to implement it. So you really do need to consider the impact on children. So there might be time management issues. I think, as a lot of you have said, lack of motivation, staff, teachers, support workers having appropriate skills. I think communication skills is also a really important part of it as well. Helen says, I feel as though my input may not be valued by fellow staff. I can understand that too. Yeah. I think it's about being able to communicate your, not just your ideas, but also your passion as well. Often, if you are very passionate about something, it can become contagious as well. Although in some cases, some people find passion quite annoying as well. So I think you need to have a happy medium. I think the development of professional knowledge and skills is something that a lot of you may need to consider. And this may not just be for yourselves, it may be for other people involved in the environment too. I suggested on Blackboard there were some clips to watch about the early childhood director discussing how they were implementing the initial changes with the early years learning framework. I thought there was some really good insights in there. She talked about emotions and strategies to assist in implementing those changes to the curriculum, because it's quite a while ago now, but it was quite a difficult time. Did anyone get the opportunity to watch those clips? Any strategies that you remember that they talked about to assist in that change process?
I've got some strategies that I wrote down. I found it really interesting, that video. I hope you can hear me. The TV's
I
on
can
as
hear
well.
you all good.
Okay.
All good, thanks, Jay.
So one big one was like time is an issue, but because they put importance as a whole staff on getting to know the framework and implementing it in their practice, they were finding time through staff meetings, PD workshops, and also providing time for people to have conversations about it. So not just the like, here's all the information. They provided time for them to actually communicate and talk about the way that they felt about it, and acknowledging people's emotions and how they felt about enacting it.
Yeah.
I also loved the sharing board where they put questions on it, and they had opportunities for parents, for students, and for staff to answer the questions. So they found out what kind of language was being used in relation to the framework that they might not have thought of. So a way to communicate with children and families about the framework. So yeah, I thought that was really cool, the way they did that.
Yeah, I did too. I thought that was an excellent idea. And as Fiona says here, it was getting the voice of the families as well. And so to have some common understandings, I thought that was a really good way as well. So Leisha, you're talking about Kotter's 8 steps to follow to allow for change in an organisation. Did you want to have a chat about that? Thanks, Jade.
Yes, it's a business idea.
Mm-hmm.
They have a set of 8 steps where you start to get people on board. I used to teach it through Nokia, when Nokia was Stephen Allop, the CEO of Nokia. He put out a memo to his staff saying they were on a burning bridge. And what we were looking at is how they then looked at, they were going to change the organisation, they had to get the staff on board. And then everybody then had to pitch in and work through the steps, so that by the end of the 8 steps, they had everybody sharing the same common goals across the organisation. So Kotter, it's like a iceberg. There's something at the top that needs to happen, and then you've got the 8 steps underneath. Or as I used to do it, as a penguin walking up the iceberg.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So I teach it as a penguin walking up, step by step up the iceberg.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So that was an idea. We basically, you don't allow, some businesses don't like it because it actually means it's going to cost money in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an idea that is out there for businesses.
Excellent. Often it's not so much about money as well. It's when, change may actually happen because there has been an issue, or maybe, like, for example, if we're talking about long day care, you may have an accreditation coming up, or you may have not done well, so you have to implement change then. And often, sometimes it takes an issue or a problem before people will actually try and make change, which is a bit, sad, I believe. Yifang says, I was impressed in the sharing board. This is different. In China, the board usually used to be put for the announcements rather than discussion with parents. Yeah. I guess in some situations, depending on the context of the school or the early years environment. Some administrators, some leaders don't like those kind of communication boards because they're concerned that there might be negative feedback connotations. So yeah, so in some ways it does take a little bit of risk taking in that way. You know, I think it's really important to have constructive criticism, but sometimes the powers that be don't really want to hear about constructive criticism because that often does involve change. Okay, so yeah, so we've shared quite a few of those strategies. So I think one of the critical factors again was the need for that supporting professional learning through professional development and workshops, and again just committing to that change. So Leisha's actually posted Cotter's 8 steps there. Thank you very much for that, Leisha. And Pamela has said that the board is also a way of educating parents about the changes and using the language and including them in the transition or change process. That's going to be really important. Yeah. And of course, this may definitely be the case in your own adaptations or changes that you might want to make in the learning environment. You need to think about all of the different stakeholders and how you might want to get them involved and how any changes might impact. You might also need to consider in terms of time frames, not having too many changes at once. So small steps, as was noted in the clips that you watched. So there is definitely a place for resistance in the process of change, as we've discussed. Sometimes change really can be met with adversity, and there's often that imbalance between joy and reward and disappointment and risk. And I think if this balance isn't kept in check, if there is an imbalance, it really can lead to burnout for some people and dissatisfaction in their job as well. But of course, this is where our growth mindset comes into play. This is why the process of change, we really need to think about, you know, a positive mindset, you know, generating new ideas and gaining support for these ideas and implementing them in practice. So it really does require a very high level of effort and also resilience as well. And it involves moving from that fixed mindset of resistance and often negativity to a growth mindset where change is seen as possibilities. And, you know, in a lot of ways, it can be, it can revitalize work environments as well. And it often really does involve embracing disruption as well. So in some cases that may be inevitable. And, you know, when we do make changes, often mistakes will be made, but as we try and teach our students, you know, we really need to think of those mistakes as, you know, ongoing learning and development. So it's about evaluating practice and trying new things. If we don't try new things, if we fear change, then we're never going to move forward, I think is the concern. So we've got more on the idea that, I think it's in response to Jade, I think that the value of the sharing board was the guiding questions. Maybe if it was just an open board for posting any things that parents wanted to say, it might not be as valuable. Yeah, guiding questions are really important. The idea that we have that we have not implemented yet is to structure feedback through reflective type questions, that parents can answer. Instead of getting a wide range of issues, we're able to ask for specific feedback. However, some parents do not value quality education and believe in the stigma that centres are an expensive babysitting service. I think definitely I agree here, Warren, and I think the concern with a lot of private owners of long day childcare centres is that often there is negativity from parents as well, because they do resent paying those large fees. Okay. So resilience, I found there's some quite really good research about resilience out there. It's the capacity, I guess, to persevere under adversity and also to be able to bounce back after you've had some setbacks. So if we look at resilience as a multi-dimensional framework, so to support change, we can identify 4 distinct dimensions. So I'm referring here to the research by Mansfield, Beltman, Price, and McConney, and I put that in the reference list as well. So they investigated how graduating early career teachers perceived resilient teachers. So it was a quantitative study, and it involved about 200 teachers and using survey data, and they were indicating their views of resistance developing according to their career stage. So for some of them, resilience was demonstrated through the persistence in overcoming challenges. So they called that the motivational dimension. For others, it was about being adaptable and having a range of strategies to support practice. So that was the profession-related dimension, or the ability to laugh and have a happy attitude and look after personal well-being. So that work-life balance, that was the emotional dimension. And the research found that often this is an area that is lacking with teachers, especially the teachers that we see as being inspirational teachers, teachers that don't have weekends, that spend their weekends working and stay up late at night. So that emotional dimension was really lacking. And then, as well as building supportive and supportive relationships. So that was the social dimension. So the responses to the surveys, it really did emphasize that teacher resilience is very much manifested within particular contexts and within school culture. So school culture was a really important factor in the development of resilience, especially for those beginning teachers. And we all know how important it is to have those supports for beginning teachers to make sure that they can continue on in the profession. We don't want to lose them. And this is where the Mentoring Beginning Teacher program in Queensland has really made a difference, I think. Just checking the chat. Okay. So to be an agent of change, as well as being resilient, it requires dedication to ongoing learning and to professional development. So this is very much what we're thinking about for your assessment task. But I do think it's important that you do factor in resilience as part of that when you are writing up your assignment. I think that's a really important part. But an important part of developing this inquiry stance in your professional learning, in your professional development and teaching practice involves having solid knowledge of practice, knowledge in practice, and knowledge for practice. So with this awareness, teachers within an inquiry frame of mind are able to take more control of their learning. So as discussed in the Cochrane, Smith and Little reading this week, developing an inquiry habit of mind is essential. So the habit of developing and valuing deep learning, it's very important. And again, that has to do with the culture of the school or the setting. So Timperley suggests that any professional learning should start, it should first be teachers asking themselves direct and very focused questions about what needs to happen in their environment. So importantly, what children or students need to know and do. So some of the questions that Timperley suggested were things like, what knowledge and skills do children need to meet curricular, personal and social goals? That was an important one. Thinking about prior knowledge. So what do students and children already know? What sources of evidence have we used and how adequate are they? So how do we collect data? Do we use, observation? Do we use testing? So formative, summative testing? And what do how do they actually learn? How can we build on what they know? So it's about, again, making those steps moving forward. So Timperley believed that answering these questions really required very focused assessment for learning in early years. And, there's a lot of debate around assessment for learning. Educational leaders really need to know how to gather detailed information about the knowledge and skills of individual students, and to really determine what is limiting their engagement and learning. So to be mindful of what might be getting in the way of their learning. So it's about collecting appropriate data. Why the double asterisks in the upper left quadrant? Let me see, I can't see. I've got, as always, the chat is so huge, I can't see my screen. Sorry, give me a moment. Now it's all going to pot. I can't actually see my screen. Is that an arrow that you put in there, Jade? I seriously cannot see the screen. Oh, here we go. I'm moving it. I can't be sure, actually. Just give me one moment while I try and get this chat out of the way. Very frustrating. I cannot move the chat screen. I'm sorry. Let's just move on. I cannot see it. Now I've got a arrow and a circle on the screen. Thanks, Jade. That looks very pretty though. All right. So talking more about these communities of inquiry. So we've talked about this before, but it really is characterized by those interdependent relationships. So those relationships that create a really strong culture of learning. So these relationships, they can take place between teachers and children. They can take place amongst children, and also between children in the community as well, that we saw very much in those inquiry-based learning stimulus that we had a look at in terms of when we looked at the legless lizard. And it's important to remember as well that, as we have discussed, teachers really do improve their practice in the company of their colleagues. So for far too long, I think, we've worked very much in isolation as teachers, with only really brief opportunities to discuss professional learning, especially in prior to school contexts. I'm not sure if you guys would agree with me, but I've always found it a battle to find time to have discussions around critical reflection and to even think about implementing change, because the business of the day seems to get in the way. Warren says, agreed, group collaboration is a rarity. Yeah, very much so. But research is really clear that learning improves when teacher learning happens in the learning environment. So that really is up to leadership. They need to provide consistent support to make sure that teachers have the opportunity to learn from each other. And again, I think this is something that you really need to think about in terms of your action plan in your own context. So using those networked communities of inquiry, not just in schools or in learning settings, I think looking outward as well and working collaboratively with other schools and organisations is a really good way to go as well. So really involving in those pedagogical discussions and sharing inspirations about your own work. So for example, the sorts of things that you might want to do in your future, in your current workplaces, sharing those with other schools and sharing your knowledge and your understandings as well. So it really is about developing that culture of inquiry. So in terms of professional learning, we can see it in 5 forms. I'm sure there are many others, but I think in terms of your professional learning for your action plan, I think we can look at formal training, consultation, coaching, communities of practice, and depending on your setting, you might even want to consider mentoring as well. So training, consultation, I'm going to get to that later. So training events and activities. So these might include workshops, conferences, in-service presentations. There could be live or web-based workshops, which are becoming very, very popular these days. A lot of conferences and things are web-based now as well. So, they could also involve discussions or demonstrations as well. So professional training that, imparts knowledge and information, and also that provides opportunities to practice all of those key skills and encourage reflection as well. So coaching, we've probably all had opportunities to either be a coach or to be coached. So normally it's voluntary and it's meant to be non-judgmental, and often it's best done in a collaborative partnership. So it focuses on developing specific skills or understandings in the work environment. And I think coaching is often involved when workplaces do implement change. So consultation, is very much about helping the service or school with their professional objectives. So it's much like the artist who supported the teacher and students in the Legless Lizard clip. So it involves instruction, it might involve problem solving, introducing new understandings and skills into the learning environment. It might often involve professional influence as well. So yeah, what have we got here? Senior Business Teachers has set up a private Facebook page for collaboration across the state. Excellent. Yifang, consultation seems like discussion. Yeah, consultation, it's more, often you'll have consultants, paid consultants come in as well. Sometimes they're voluntary, but more than likely they'll be they'll be paid. Research, Warren says, also argues that the professional learning needs to be relevant. Educators need to guide, in part, the learning that is happening. Otherwise, the effectiveness in the classroom application is lost. Do these forms allow for an educator input? I agree completely. So you would hope that formal training in any organisation, whether it be education or otherwise, is based around evaluation of practices, and often it will be linked to the Australian professional standards. So evaluation of practice, and then clear and smart goal setting. And then from that goal setting, educators being able to choose their own professional development and learning, whatever form that takes, whether it be formal training or specific consultation or coaching. So I think there has to be educator input. I think in the past, in my day, when I was teaching in primary schools, there would be an offering of professional development and everyone would go along and do it. And it would be, you know, once a month, you might have a particular professional development and everyone would have to join in, whether it was applicable to your practice or not. I'm sure everyone else here is, or some of you may have had this experience as well. All right, so communities of practice. We've talked about this quite a lot. So these are groups of individuals, who come together on the basis of sharing a common professional interest. And so I guess a desire as well to improve their professional practice in a particular area, sharing knowledge, sharing insights, sharing observations that they've made. So WENGA is Lave and Wenger, L-A-V-E as well, Lave and Wenger, 1998. I put this in the references as well. Is someone, if you're really wanting to look at seminal research on communities of practice, that's where to go. So this might involve staff meetings where knowledge and formal training is shared. So if you do formal training, you bring it back to the school or the service and share it, and then discuss how it might be used within your context. Peer observation and feedback, I think, is part of communities of practice. And also communities of practice, it very much involves participation in specialised professional organisations. I think this is really important. So in associations or networks. So me personally, I'm a member of Early Childhood Australia, and I'm also a member of the Australian Teacher Education Association. So I get journal articles, I get information, I get invites and discounts to conferences. And, it really is part of being part of an organisation, part of an organisation where people have similar ideas and similar insights and perspectives. So it's a way of sharing your professional knowledge. I think it's personally, I think being a member of professional associations is really important. And I know that these days it's really a lot of organisations look at your professional associations when they're looking at your CV as well. Community of practices is a great overlap for LCN 600. What's LCN 600, Warren?
It's the Connected Learning. It's run by Hank and Ivana, and
Right.
they talk about that whole, you just basically very, very summarize it all, the community of practice and networking with professional associations, etc. But this just goes way down into the theory of it all.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, you know, it's all about that community of inquiry. And it's about, to me, I did my PhD around professional identity of early childhood practitioners. And this community of inquiry, a community of practice, and the opportunity to critically reflect is so important for early childhood teachers. So let me just, I'm having a quick look through the chat. Yeah, talked about professional development choices based on limited funds allocated. Yep. QCT requirements mean PD has to be done even if it's paid by you as a teacher. Like, I don't think I've ever been to any PD really that I haven't paid for, to be honest. I kind of think of that as something that I claim on my tax, to be honest, because, well, especially, you know, at a university level, we don't get any funding or budget for professional practice. Would Twitter groups count as a community of practice, as there are often chats on a variety of topics? I know at first I thought that was a joke, but no, I think that, you know, Twitter groups are very much, you know, these days it's how a lot of people connect. I guess it depends on how they're monitored. That's something that I worry about with those sorts of things, how they're monitored. And yeah, but I would definitely say, yeah. Can I read your research paper? Well, maybe. If you want to, it might bore you to death. There are professional pages on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, so I'm each of the professional organisations actually have their own Facebook pages and things. So Lady Gallery have their own Facebook page. Early Child Australia have their own Facebook page. So they do connect in that way. So I would say Twitter groups that are connected with professional organisations, Fiona, are the way to go. SIGN, what's that, Jade? SINE?
It's a school inclusion network for educators, and it's run by the Alliance for, I think, like Inclusive Education Australia. And Lauren Swancutt, she's done things for QT. I was introduced to it through one of my subjects in first semester of masters. And she came on and did a lecture, and she said, I've got this Facebook page and it's connected to the SIGN website and the All Means All website, and then they've got a Twitter page as well. So like all these networks and ways to engage.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I think depending on what your area of interest is as well, as to which professional association you use, you're involved with. I was talking to some first year secondary students, and they were really excited. They're, you know, future history teachers, and they were really excited when they found out there was a History Teachers Association. So they're going off to join it with a student discount. So, you know, all of those sorts of things, it really makes you feel part of a community. I have been on some Australian teaching Twitter chats and STEM school chats. They are a group of Australian teachers, not a professional organisation as such, but it doesn't have to be a professional organisation, Fiona. I think anything that involves professional discussions and critical insights into practice, it can only be beneficial for you. I think the only time I think it would be if it's not regulated, if it becomes a little bit nasty. That's would be my only concern with unregulated chats. So where was I up to? So Mentoring, I have talked about mentoring before because again, it's connected with professional identity. It's connected, I believe that it's a part of professional learning, especially in providing support and guidance for beginning teachers in meeting the Australian professional standards. So it's an essential part of keeping our beginning teachers in practice. Has anyone involved in any mentoring organisations in their school or in their learning environment? Has anyone done the mentoring beginning teachers workshops? No? We've trained over 3,000 teachers, and that's including online as well. So to support teachers that are, teaching out west and all over the place. So, yeah. I've mentored student teachers in their practical sessions. So, Leisha, you mean when they go out on placement?
Yes.
Yeah,
So I've
that's
had
great.
student teachers for up to 8 weeks,
That's fantastic. Yeah,
and they've basically taken over my classes most of the time.
yeah, that's brilliant. And how have you found that, Leisha?
Well, it was interesting. One student teacher we had, they took over my year 12 business class, and she was coming from the other side of the school, which is quite a distance. I will admit that. So she's a bit late. So my kids got excited. They said, "Miss, we've got you today." And I said, "No, you don't. I'm sorry." They said, "But we want you back." That's nice, but I'm sorry. I didn't really take to the student teacher, and I didn't know quite how to tell her that she needed to be working on some rapport with the kids.
Yeah.
In a nice way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the year 11s and 12s were pretty blunt.
Oh, were they? Okay. Oh, and it is quite difficult because with my first years now, so they go out on their placement in second year, except the early childhood teachers who go out, they have to do their birth to 2 placement in first year. So that's very soon as well. Some of the students are actually going to be so close in age to the students that they're going to be teaching. And some of them are a little bit concerned about that in some ways. So we've been talking a lot about developing professional relationships and making sure that you have good security settings on your Facebook and online accounts and things like that. And things like not exchanging phone numbers, or even, there have been cases where students have tried to, I don't know if the term is friend or access teachers on online gaming sites, on platforms. So, you really do need to be very conscious of your social media footprint and privacy settings. I think as a teacher, it's really important. Okay, I still can't move my chat. It's just stuck. I'm just going to have to live with it. All right, so any questions or any comments about forms of professional learning? Because this is really what you'll be thinking about right at this moment, moving into your second assessment task. So how are you going to, you've got your action plan that you have outlined in your final section of your assessment task. So in your implications for your personal practice. So now that you've got that, how are you going to move in? What do you need to think about for your professional action plan? So you really need to consider, last week I posed to you that if you wanted to think about short-term plans or long-term plans or a combination of both as well in terms of what you're going to do. I think that's important to start with, and that's going to depend on what you're actually wanting to do. Has anyone thought about the time frames for your action plan yet? Not yet? Something that I want you to include, because I think it was Warren might have brought it up last week, because the considerations, one of the considerations in the actual table is time frame. So I'd like you to really start thinking about that. Other things that I want you to start thinking about, incremental and continuous. Okay, what do you mean by that, Warren?
Sorry, I've got dinner in front of me as well. Just when you asked about our timeframes. So my proposed time frame is to be incremental. So maybe every, whatever it is, I have to work it out. Just for example, every 6 weeks, and it'll be a continuous improvement, because it is along the lines of professional development overall.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, it's good that you're thinking about it. Right now, I want you to start thinking about these questions. So you may not be here yet, but you should be soon. You need to think about how you're going to extend your knowledge and inform your practice. What do you need to know? What further knowledge do you need to know? What are you curious about? So what do you want to change or modify or challenge about your current practice or your understandings? And it could be small, or it could be something larger with whole school. There are no limitations for this. It really is up to you. So Jade's thinking of doing a long-term plan, because I want to look at developing inclusive education practices for kindy and prep teachers, so supporting children with developmental delay. I also want to look at the transition process from kindy to prep to support children with developmental delays. So it will be a long-term plan, maybe a year, possibly 2 terms. Maybe it's too much to fit in though. I was thinking that exact thing, Jade. I think you need to choose one. Yeah. You do only have 2,500 words, and that's actually the 2,500 words. Half of that is for the first section, your rationale. So really you've only got 1,250 words. So I would narrow it down. So really concentrate on, you're meant to be concentrating on your research question. So don't stray from your research question. Keep it targeted on that, because you're going to be using the same research. So basically your literature review and your analysis is your new knowledge. So what, from that and your findings, that's led into your what am I trying to say? Into your final section. So you need to really stick to the point. Don't stray. How are you feeling about that, Jade? Do you have a particular thought about what you would prefer to concentrate on?
Yeah, well, that made me realize I need to focus on the first point of the plan that I just said in that comment. So just overall supporting children with developmental delays and improving inclusive practices.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the transition is something I'm really interested in, but maybe that's a future plan.
I think what you could do as well, if out of your new knowledge, you do have a few areas that you wanted to change or work towards or challenge in your community, you could actually have that as a second stage to work towards the future. I'm happy for you to include that as well, if that's still part of that first part of the research question in some way, I'm happy for you to continue on with that and have a second stage. You don't have to break it down, but just,
The next step would be to, like, once we've kind of achieved a good like development in our knowledge of inclusive practice in this area, maybe next year we could focus on the transition of these children from kinder to prep.
that's great. Yeah, I
Just do
love it.
like that.
Yeah, definitely. Because then you're kind of talking about short term and then long term, but then maybe even longer as well. So yeah, think big. Yeah. Think of yourself as a change agent. Yeah, it is hard to choose though, but the easiest way to do it is to just keep focused on your research question. Do not stray from your research question, or else you're going to go off task. One of the things that I really noticed in the first assessment task, I'm halfway through marking them now, is some students didn't come back and revisit their research question enough. So, you know, even though you had a section for findings, you still had to, in your literature review, answer your research question to a certain extent, or at least talk about your research question, or a concluding sentence about your research question. Some of you did it beautifully, but just in any essay, especially if it's based on a specific question, you need to keep coming back and revisiting it throughout. And then at the end, you know, your implications, and then finally a nice little summary at the end. Some of you have done it absolutely beautifully, but others have sort of missed that important revisiting of it. So Leisha's thought was using the model of practice from my assignment in Prep Year 2. So this could be a long-term plan. Okay. Prep to Year 2. Okay. So you're thinking of introducing it in Prep and then following it through to Year 2.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
That sounds good. Yeah. Yeah.
Because Wendy Beamish, I discovered, has got a model of practice she suggested for neurodiverse children that actually assists all children in the classroom.
Okay.
And she's based it on the early years learning framework.
Ah, beautiful.
That can be put into Prep to Year 2, and that means it's consistent across those first 3 years.
Excellent. I like that. I like the consideration of consistency of practice, especially as the children do move up into grades that they are experiencing a continuity in approaches. I think that's really important. I like that. Anyone else? I think you said you would put my plan in the last semester in kindergarten. Okay.
Yeah. Because I want to change the transitions, so I don't want the kindergarten's children get too early in the primary school transitions. So I will focus on the last semester, because kindergartens, they have the 3 years in China, and the last semesters, almost the children's age 5 to 6. I think that they're more mature to get in touch with those transitions. Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent. No, it's great. It's wonderful to hear that you really are thinking about those timeframes, because I think even though some of you who aren't in school-based contexts, I think you can still, you know, I think Jade, did you say are you teaching at the moment?
I'm a supply teacher, but I work at the same school. I've done various contracts, and I've actually had the opportunities to work in the kindy and then all the way from prep to year 12.
Fantastic.
So I know all of the kids, and it's actually really nice because I can see a future at that school for me.
Yeah.
one day. I'm just, because I was doing my master's, I decided to do supply.
No,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, good plan. So are you using the context that you're working in as the example school, I guess you could say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Because I
I'm
know,
hoping through one day get an opportunity to work in their inclusive education department.
yeah. Oh, nice. Very good. I think those of you who are either here tonight or listening to the recording who aren't working in a school-based setting or have never worked in a school-based setting, you will need to email me and we'll discuss it. Last year, because I want it to be as close to your practice or as close to something that means meaningful for you as possible. Last year I had a student who her plan is to then go on and do her PhD, and we managed to actually conceptualize an action plan that worked within that context. So if you are a little bit unsure about how you're going to work an action plan, if you're not actually teaching or even thinking about teaching in the future, please contact me, because there are definitely ways and means around it. The most important thing is to try and make it meaningful to you. That's really is a really important part of this particular unit, I think, to use that knowledge that you have gained and then to think about the next steps in practice. Anyone else have anything that they'd like to share in terms of the assessment task, or any questions? It's, you know, looking at the task sheet, if any of you have got it there in front of you, it like the last one, it is broken down, especially that part A, the structure of it. That should be quite easy to go through. A lot of students have really enjoyed doing that. So your life history to start with, then your professional history as well. What attracted you to teaching, major influences on your thinking about teaching, including theories, your teaching experience, positions you've held, and your interest in early childhood education. So what made you specifically want to, improve your understanding about early childhood education, specifically curriculum and pedagogy, remembering you always need to come back to curriculum and pedagogy. Personal practice and personal goals. This one's 500 words, so this is quite an important section. So, this would be, you'd be talking about your personal goals, and it says, identify key early childhood curriculum principles and pedagogical practices that currently shape your evolving philosophy. So I guess consider from the unit content, how and what all of the readings that you've done, and from what you've learnt in your research with your first assessment task, how has that shaped your beliefs about practice, especially in terms of early childhood curriculum and pedagogy? So it suggests to highlight 2 to 3 pivotal ideas, and you might want to break that down into sections. If you wanted to have headings, that's fine. So I guess that would include outlining your current and emerging professional teaching goals, making links with your research question that you identified in assignment 1. So it has to be based on that first assignment, even to the point of, using the, you're able to use the same references as well. So if we look at part B, Yeah. So it's an extension of the work undertaken in assignment 1. So you're able to use the same readings or references or research again, which you would be referring to that because that's where your new knowledge base is from. And you would also include additional readings and references. You may want to talk about, you know, resilience, develop how you would develop resilience or the need for resilience, referencing some resources. So got 2 pages of them here. You can use any of those. Yeah. And also you're encouraged to write it in a mixture of first and third person. So you would be using I statements and things like in my experience for your own opinions. But then you would also refer to research as well in supporting your statements. Jade says, my understanding is that part 1 is a critical reflection with links to theory. Does the whole of part 1 need to link to the research question? If you have a look, Jade, the first part is more about you. So it's very much about talking about how you've developed new understandings. But it's still, it says, briefly explain links to your evolving philosophy or understanding of early childhood curriculum and pedagogy and the research question that you explored in assessment, in assignment 1. So those personal understandings or your evolving philosophy should be focused on that research question. Do you see what I mean, Jade? That was a good question, Jade. Yeah. Is everyone clear about that? It has to revolve around that research question. The research question is still central. It has to be central. So why is the research question important? What key ideas were raised in your critical analysis of the literature and curriculum frameworks? What plan of action will you put into place for your ongoing professional development in the area? Consider using the following 3 subheadings. So this is a guide. Any further questions? Of course, as you go, you'll have more, just email me. Very happy. And if you wanted to run some ideas by me, as we've done in the first assessment task, more than happy to help you conceptualize, to support you in any way I can. It is, as I said last week, they're all going to be completely different because it will revolve around your specific choice of focus, your research question, but also your context as well. So I can't stress enough the importance of those of you who are not actually teaching at the moment, or who maybe don't imagine that they will be teaching in the future, to get in contact with me, and I can support you in a way to move forward with that. Okay. Anything else I can help you with? No. Some of you have been very quiet tonight. Last week, Fiona says, page 2 of the references, please. What does that mean, Fiona?
Sorry, I thought you said you had 2 pages of references to show us at the end here, so I thought there might be an extra page. I was sitting here ready to copy it,
Oh, okay.
but no.
There you go. It's on the
Okay, thank
PowerPoint.
you.
It's on the PowerPoint, Fiona. You don't need to copy them out. So the PowerPoint on Blackboard has all of the slides. Check your APA though. I can't guarantee that that's all correct. Jade says you've been too chatty. No, not at all. It's great. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, sharing ideas. I always learn so much from this unit as well. Everyone's sharing their experience. I just find it so incredibly stimulating. It's fantastic. So as the weeks progress and your understandings about what you're going to do evolve, in the sessions, I really do encourage you to share your ideas. As always, some of you have shared on the Padlet as well. It's a nice way of connecting. Please, I'd like to actually see a bit more of that for this second assessment task. I think students last year were really keen on the Padlet. Maybe I haven't been advertising or talking about it enough, but just sharing your thoughts. Some of them started fairly lengthy conversations as well.
Angela,
yes.
Angela, sorry to disturb you. Can I ask that in the part B, in the action plan, should we connect with the literatures? Because in the third subtitle here is the professional development action plan. Should we connect this with the literatures in this part?
I think so. If we're relevant,
Oh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I guess the rule of thumb with any assessment task is to reference any statements that aren't your own. I think that's the best way to think about it. So if it's a reflection, just something that you have shared, something personal, you know, a lot of what you have to do in your life history, your professional history, that's not going to need referencing. But when it comes to things like, for example, the professional development action plan, considerations might include, so links to curriculum and pedagogy, you may want to reference, if you've got specific ideas there, you may want to reference professional growth and critical reflection activities. Again, if you're actually there, most of this will be dot points, but if you actually are talking about specific strategies for resilience, for example, I would be thinking about, you know, if you're talking about entrepreneurship, or if you're talking about collaboration, or if you're talking about a culture of inquiry or communities of practice, then I'd be thinking about referencing possibly in text if it's really relevant. Yeah. Again, a very good question.
Okay,
Excellent
thank you.
question. Okay. Anything further that I can help you with? We might finish up soon. Okay, I am going to stop the recording. So those of you who are at home, who are listening, if you could please make sure that you contact me if you have any questions. We'll see you next week.